Welcome
to Grand Sumo Breakdown,
the unofficial sumo podcast
for official sumo fans.
Welcome to Grand Sumo Breakdown. This is Ryan.
This is Jake.
This is Flerick.
And today, Jake is introducing something to Flerick and I, not Mac. Mac doesn't care enough to be here. So, Jake, tell us what sort of statistical analysis you are bringing to the show.
So, from our Japan trip, it turns out, we made a joke about this on one of our commercials, but the Japanese complicated space toilets actually do export data.
Ah, perfect.
On like all the button pushes. So I've compiled that into a spreadsheet. And
they have a sumo database to export at the same time?
Yeah.
Bidet database.
It's similar. It's
database.
Ooh.
Well played.
It's actually run by the same guy. That's about as far as this joke can go.
Yeah. Fun side note, I legit want a bidet now.
Oh, it was magical.
Far superior.
What are we talking about?
I don't know.
So we've
Why don't
done
you tell us?
Over the couple of years that we've been watching and poorly commentating on sumo, we have learned a little bit more each basho about the different kimarite that people use, the different techniques and the different styles of sumo that people try. Okay, well, some of us who've watched all of the matches,
Sure.
So I decided that I would do, because I was bored and hadn't done a spreadsheet in a while, I decided to create a new one analyzing the sum total of different wrestlers' techniques. How much do they use one technique versus another? How much do they use one technique compared to how often that technique is used overall? So in doing something along these lines, what I want to start out with here is I want to introduce you to a new wrestler. This is a wrestler that you may not have heard of, but I'm sure you are very familiar with.
Is he on Maizumo for Nagoya? Is he?
No, this is actually a Makuuchi wrestler.
Oh.
And his name is Namiyama, spelled with the kanji for average and mountain. Namiyama is actually also an acronym for Normalization Analysis Method, Inferencing Yearly Average Metadata Assembly. Namiyama is not a physical wrestler, but Namiyama is a table that I have created out of every match that has happened in the last year in the Makuuchi division specifically.
So he's like he's a representation of a statistically like normal rikishi of the last meta of sumo, right?
You nailed it. So
That's hilarious.
For example, Namiyama's most used technique is Oshidashi, or frontal push-out. He's used this technique 462 times this year, which is 25.55% of his matches.
That sounds good. That sounds like a lot of matches to do in 1 year.
He's a busy fella. So yeah, using every single Makuuchi match that has happened, 462 of them have been finished by Oshidashi, representing, like I said, 25.55%.
Quick question: is this past calendar year or just 2019?
Those are the same thing.
Like, okay.
I guess, are you
it is
trying to
six
say,
basho.
do we have some 2018 sprinkled
We
in?
do. We have the last six basho all the way up through Nagoya of 2019.
All right.
Which unfortunately means my lazy butt is going to have to do a little bit more work every basho to keep this current.
If I can come up with a new Bansuke prediction every basho, you can look up stats for 5 minutes every basho.
Yeah, I already
know.
have a
That's kind of
task,
a
though.
lot.
I have to put on pants for you to come over to my house and record that episode every basho.
I have to put on pants to come over here every single basho. Yeah, we're kind of booked, Ryan.
I think that this really falls on you here. You're the one who's not pulling his weight or pants.
I mean, I don't have to wear pants to put together the Bansuke prediction, so
We're aware. Going back to the thing that I brought you guys over here to talk about. So Oshidashi, like I mentioned, is the most commonly used kimarite. After that, big surprise, Yorikiri is the next one. 437 matches, or 24.17% of all matches in Makuuchi that have been completed in the last six basho. I'm not just going to go through and list all of them, but it's pretty clear that those two are the most common ones that you see.
After that, it's Zubunari, Kakezori, Shumo Kuzori.
We're all impressed that you know several uncommon kimarite names, Ryan. Well done.
Thank you.
After that, actually, no, it drops off quite a bit. Both of those. Sorry, go ahead.
And no, I was just to give some definitions on those. Oshidashi, which is the frontal
push out.
Frontal push out. And
so
then,
you're pushing with your arms. You're not necessarily grabbing the other guy's belt.
And Yorikiri is the frontal force out, where you're grabbing the belt and kind of lifting them over the edge. Right?
Yes. Well, not necessarily lifting, but pushing the other guy when you guys are if you are in a belt grabbing situation with your opponent and you maneuver him so that he steps out, that's Yorikiri.
Okay. So I guess watching sumo in this last year, those are kind of two very prevalent styles. So it makes sense that they're actually the top two.
Exactly. Those two make up almost exactly half of all total matches. After that, those are both about 25%, and the next one is Hitaki Komi, which is less than 10%. Hitaki Komi being when you slap down. You grab your opponent's head and push him down so that he has to touch the ground.
The Omnishiki special.
Didn't see enough of him to know, but I'll assume you're correct.
Oh yeah. That's. I feel like that's like the one way he kept in Makuuchi this past, like at least the past year we were watching him,
where he was actually doing well. That was the move.
He had that kind of pull down, like pull and push down at the same time, like to a science.
Yeah. Well, he was definitely a veteran who had to rely on a lot of tricks towards the end of his career there. That's for sure.
Mm-hmm.
So, Jake, how are we going to be using this Namiyama?
Nah, that's good. I made a table.
Oh, okay.
What I'm going to be using this for is comparing other wrestlers to Namiyama. So, for example, let's start with Tamawashi. So I take all of Tamawashi's career Makuuchi matches, and I make the same table. And I find that Tamawashi, his most commonly used Kimurite, is also Oshidashi, just like the last year on average. However, he uses that 48% of the time, which is
a lot more than 25%.
It's a lot more. So I have another comparison that I do here. How does 48% compare to 25%? And what that means is that the result is that Tamawashi uses Oshidashi 86% more often than a normal wrestler would. Right. So we can learn more from that 86% number than we can from the 48% overall usage rate that Tamawashi's got. So what this tells us is that he is significantly more focused on pushing his opponent out of the ring than an average wrestler would be. Now, this isn't like groundbreaking stuff here. You can go to Taka Keisho, for example. Taka Keisho uses Oshidashi 90% more often than an average wrestler. That's one that's pretty obvious. Anybody who's watched Taka Keisho for any length of time knows he is a pusher. He's not a grappler.
Yeah.
In fact, he has used, in all of his Makuuchi matches, he has used grappling for 4 total wins, like ever. He's used Yorikiri 1 time. Mm-hmm. That is like about 3% as often as a normal wrestler does.
That's fantastic.
I thought we talked about that he just got his 3rd Yorikiri.
Probably career.
Oh, Makuuchi.
Yeah. This table is the table that I've made for my reference. I waffled over this a few times, but the table that I created, I thought it would make the most sense to use only Makuuchi career, because that is where the guys of this caliber, this is where they stabilize. This is where they're actually going up against guys that are on their level, and it's where I feel the data is a lot more useful to study. Because like if you have somebody huge, like I did a couple historical examples. I got Akebono. Akebono was 6'8", he's 500 pounds. Up until he got to Makuuchi, he basically just, vaporized guys. He didn't necessarily have to do anything in particular. So I thought it was more useful to look at what are his stats once he gets there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes a lot more sense, because you can't really learn too much on those kind of lower division matches. Because just like you said, he was vaporizing people. Mm-hmm. It wasn't really, he wasn't using a style that he needed to win against the best. He was just using a style that can win against people.
Whoever was in front of him, exactly. So, yeah, that's my reasoning there. I'm sure there's value to that data, but when I'm trying to compile as much of it as possible and put it together for multiple wrestlers, it seems like it's probably better to just stick with the top division stuff. But I did this for every single technique that they have used in their Makuuchi career. And I've kind of set a bar where this is totally arbitrary, but I decided that if the guy has used this technique less than 2% of the time, that's probably not a great data point. For example, Tamawashi has used Let's find a good one. He's used Okuri Taoshi, which is a crash out with a rear grip. He's used that 3 times, which technically that's 3 times as often as average. That sounds like a big deal, right? But if he's used it only 3 times, that's not that great of a data point.
Mm-hmm.
So I go up to, what about Kote Nage? You know, he's the elbow destroyer, right?
Very much so.
Kote Nage is the move where you get your opponent, you throw them by wrenching their elbow going the wrong way. He's used that 24 times, which is twice as often as normal, as you would expect for a average wrestler. That's a pretty solid data point. Mm-hmm. That's something he's used. 5.5% of all of his wins come by Kote Nage.
Yeah, and that's pretty cool because that lines up with what we've seen of his actual wrestling.
Yeah, it does. He is. I think he's taken out like 4 guys in the last 2 years that we've been
all in Nagoya.
Really?
Yep.
Was last year Nagoya?
3 in Nagoya of 2018, and then Takayasu in Nagoya this year.
Wow.
And Takayasu does not look like he's going to be competing anytime soon.
Stay away from Tamawashi in July.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's a good deal of insight that we can get from these. Why don't we move on to Mitake Yumi, for example? Mitake Yumi, just from watching him, he's kind of a meat and potatoes guy, right? Like he's not using fancy, flashy techniques very often, and that's kind of reflected in the data. He uses Oshidashi about 50% more often than normal, which is one of his bigger outliers. He uses Yorikiri only at 10% or so more often than normal, and those make up like 60% of his total moves. So those two meat and potatoes moves make up a higher fraction of his moves, of his overall wins, than they do for an average guy. He doesn't really have a whole lot of outliers. The only other one that's significant here, he's used Tsukui Nage, which is the arm throw where you don't have a grip on your opponent's belt. You're just grabbing him by the arms, the armpits. He's used that 150% more often than normal at 4%. Still pretty low, but that's still 8 times when you would have expected him to have used it like 3.
Mm-hmm. That's pretty cool because he definitely seems to, like you say, meat and potatoes. He definitely kind of keeps to the basic, like I'm going to push you out or I'm going to get your belt and force you out.
Mm-hmm. And similarly, to go along with his prevalence for winning by Oshidashi, he has a prevalence for losing by Yorikiri. He loses to Yorikiri about twice as many of his losses as you'd expect a regular average wrestler, 83% more often.
That's very interesting.
But by contrast, he loses by Oshidashi like 38% less than the usual wrestler.
So even though it's not something that we have picked out just by watching the guy in general, he is definitely more pushing focused than average. Mm-hmm. Not a huge amount. Not like we're going to get to Takakeisho, and some of those numbers are hilarious. But he's definitely not a belt guy yet. Mm-hmm. Belt work in general is kind of regarded as more technical, and the Yokozunas, when we talk about Hakuho and Kakuryun a little bit, you're going to see a lot more belt type techniques on their wins. But so far, these second tier so far guys, these Tamawashis and Mitakeyumis that we've seen so far, they're all pure, not pure, but they're all pretty heavy on pushing.
Yeah, I that's really cool that you're able to find out the losing like Kimarite, like what they lose by the most, because that can kind of tell us like which situations they tend to lose in, and that kind of can give some real insight, honestly, onto what kind of style that they have with the sumo.
Going back, you had mentioned second tier people, so let's talk about Goeido.
Second tier.
You're talking about the Ozeki Goeido?
Yeah, second tier Goeido.
Goeido he was kind of fascinating to me because out of everybody that I have put together here,
he's like another meat and potato guy, right?
He has the least variation out of all the guys that I've studied from an average wrestler. Yep. He can't even separate himself this way.
Is he okay, what's the name of the rikishi that's like the statistical average?
Namiyama.
Is he Namiyama himself?
He may be the evolved version. But yeah, he's got pretty low numbers. There's only one weird outlier that I found. He uses Kubi Nage. This is called a headlock throw, the Wikipedia description. The attacker wraps the opponent's head or neck in his arms, throwing him down. So
interesting.
I haven't. I should look up a video of this, but like it sounds like he's kind of getting a Muay Thai grab and then just kind of forcing his opponent to the ground. He used this move, which it's a move that gets used occasionally, but he's used it 23 times in his career. That's 4% of all of his wins, which is 17 times as often as you would expect. Kubinage, yeah, like
That's
I said,
pretty cool.
not super common in all of the last year. In all of the bashos that have gone into Namiyama's stat, it's only been used 4 times in the last 6 basho. Yet Goedo in his career, 23.
That's impressive.
Wow.
I mean, maybe I'm not even.
Maybe it was
I don't know.
so. This is like you include the stats from the someone's entire Makuuchi career, right? So maybe it was like some weird thing like in the late 2000s or something like that.
Nobody could defend it.
Everyone was just kind of giving people like noogies with the arm.
Yeah, there you go.
I don't know. It could be something interesting like that because it would be interesting how meta changes kind of happen of where like certain techniques, like you said, no one could defend it. It's very doubtful in this situation, but I think that's kind of a really, really interesting thing.
Yep. And if I were good at this, what I would do is find a way to automate it so that I can find what would Namiyama's stats be in each given year. That'd be one way that I could expand this, but there's no way I'm going to do that manually. That's more than
That's work.
That's
Yeah.
work. Yeah.
Yeah.
I can copy and paste like one time by all means, but I'm not. Okay.
That would be actually really cool to see how the style changes throughout the years. Mm-hmm. That would be nice.
Yeah. There's that I know has been done on Tachiai at some point. They I think this may have been our guest Josh. Somebody put together the stats of like all pushing techniques, all throwing techniques, and like how they vary over the years, and put it on a graph. I think that's who that was.
Oh,
I don't know.
cool.
But that's a
intrigued.
fun one here. But I hadn't seen anybody who drilled down this specifically on specific wrestlers and techniques, and that's kind of why I went after this project. So next, I want to bring up my favorite 2 guys as far as what I've found in the stats: Takakeisho and Tochinoshin. Absolute polar opposites as far as their technique. No surprise to anybody that Takakeisho's numbers came out very heavy on the pushing techniques, and no surprise to anybody that Tochinoshin's come out on the grappling techniques, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So Takakeisho in Makuuchi has used Yorikiri 1 time. Tochinoshin has used Oshidashi 16 times over the course of his 10 years in the division.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's like I said earlier. That's
Wait, how many times?
16
Out of a 10-year career?
10 plus years.
10
yeah.
plus years.
Oh
yeah,
my!
he's got like 300 to 400 wins in Makuuchi, and he's used Oshidashi, the most common technique of the last year. He's used it 3.7% of the time. That's 86% less often than normal.
That's amazing.
It kind of is. Here's the one that blew me away. So Tsuridashi is kind of one of like the ultimate techniques of sumo. This is where you got both hands on your opponent's belt and you lift them out of the ring. You don't just push them. You don't just maneuver. Mm-hmm. You physically lift them off the ground and push them out.
Oh, the Tochinoshin special.
Exactly. Tochinoshin has used this move 20 times in his career. 4.6% of his wins have come by Tsuridashi. That's 40 times what we would have expected. 4,000% more often than we would have expected. In the last 6 basho, there have only been 2 of them. So we would have expected somewhere around 0.1% of his wins to come by this move instead of 4.6.
Were they both
amazing.
by Tochinoshin?
Why don't you look that
I
up
can look
for
that
me?
up,
That
yeah.
I would not be shocked.
I'll do some silent research while you guys keep going.
But yeah, there's a ton of different there's a ton of different techniques that go into each wrestler if you're not Takakeisho. But Tochinoshin, for example, let's see how many total techniques has he used? He's used 29 winning techniques in his career.
In his Makuuchi career.
For comparison, Takakeisho 13. Takakeisho doesn't have as much time, of course, but like these 2 are an excellent contrast of showing like how does one guy go about his sumo business. Mm-hmm. For Takakeisho, he's going to charge at you, he's going to push you, and when that doesn't work, he's going to pull you.
Yeah, and these are both people who made to Ozeki. So these are
exactly. Yeah, so there's a similar. They're at least comparable.
They get to the same level, but they took two completely different ways to get there.
Ryan, you find those Suridashis?
I did. So we had 2 in the past year overall. So Tochinoshin in September of last year beat Chiyotairyu by Tsuridashi, and in May of this year beat Daisho by Tsuridashi. So Tochinoshin does indeed have the 2 Tsuridashi wins in the past year.
So if nobody had gotten that move, it would have shown up as like you can't do that math. It'd be a divide by 0.
He would have done it infinitely more times.
Infinitely more times, yeah. But it's just fascinating to me how high that is. It's his 4th most common used technique in his entire career. I don't get that one.
He's strong.
Yeah,
that's how you get
He's strong. He big.
I've just figured it out.
He lift.
But yeah, so Takakeisho, like we said, 91% more often than normal, he wins by Oshidashi. Every single technique that he has used more than 2% in his Makuuchi career is either a pushing technique or a pulling technique. No grappling. Like I said, there's only the 4 of those total, so they're all way down on his list. But after Oshidashi, his next 3 techniques are all pulling type techniques, such as Tsukiyo Toshi, where you thrust your opponent to the ground, Hataki Komi, where you pull them down by the head, or Hikio Toshi, where you pull your opponent down to the ground by their hand or arm. Yeah, and those 3 make up another 30% of his wins, in addition to the 50% that come by Oshidashi.
Yeah, that lines up with what I've seen from Takakeisho as well.
Yeah.
So that's pretty cool.
So let's look at some of the all-time greats in the Yokozuna. So Hakuho, Kakuryu.
Yeah. So let's take a look at Hakuho first. Hakuho has 40 different winning techniques that he's used in his career, and a solid 13 of them he has used more than 2%. He's pretty varied, and his biggest outlier. This one is super interesting to me, and Fleric, I think you'll know what in his background this relates to. After Yorikiri, which he uses just slightly more often than normal at 30% of his wins, he suddenly gets into a bunch of throws. His second most used technique is the overarm throw, Uwate Nage, which makes up 15% of his wins, almost 3 times as often as a normal wrestler would use that technique. Down at tied for his 6th most used technique is Uwate Dashinage, which is overarm pulling throw. He uses that 2.5 times as often as normal. Fleric, why do you think Hakuho might have way more throws than he's supposed to in his list?
Because he likes... I feel like I'm not going to get this one because he likes to throw a lot of people because of his style of...
Well, I was getting at Mongolian wrestling.
Mongolian wrestling. Okay, that's what I was going to get at. Because Mongolian wrestling is very popular in Mongolia. Like, everyone kind of learns it. And
fascinating.
A lot of like grappling and throwing.
There's a lot of throwing because there isn't a ring. Yeah, you can't just like push your opponent out of the ring in Mongolian wrestling. You have to get them to the ground. And that in particular is why Hakuho, and to a lesser extent Kakuryu, are very heavy on the throws. Kakuryu, for example, has also used Uwate Dashinage 3 times as often as most people do. But interestingly, Kakuryu prefers the underarm throw. He uses Shitate Nage more than twice as often as a normal person would, and uses Uwate Nage, the overarm throw, less than a normal wrestler would.
Interesting.
Whereas Hakuho, like we mentioned, his Uwate Nage 3 times as much as normal, and his underarm throw, Shitate Nage, only about 1.5 times as often. He still uses it a lot, but he has a strong preference for the overarm.
That's pretty cool. I'm curious about where, with Kakuryu, where the pulling techniques kind of fall for him. Because I definitely, when I think Kakuryu, I think the balance of knowing when to pull is part of his style.
Kakuryu does use pulling a little bit more than Hakuho does. Hakuho uses Hataki Komi, Tsukiyo Toshi, and Hikio Toshi, the main pulling techniques that we'd reference, about 15% of the time total. Whereas Kakuryu, let's see, about
23%.
About 23% of the time.
Okay, so he definitely
quite a bit more than
more.
Yeah, quite a bit more than Hakuho. However, still not hugely out of the norm.
Huh.
His numbers on those, he uses those about as often as the normal wrestler in the last year, but definitely a lot more than Hakuho does.
Yeah, and you see a lot more pushing thrusting techniques for Kakuryu in his top 10 used techniques than you do Hakuho, it looks like.
Right. Hakuho, they have similar techniques in their top 10-ish or so, except for Hakuho's got a bigger variety of different types of throws that he uses, and Kakuryu has a little bit more pushing in there. But for the most part, they are definitely both well-rounded guys that use a lot of different techniques.
That's what I was going to say. Very well-rounded, which kind of, once again, that lines up with what we're seeing. They have a lot of techniques to deal with all the kind of different situations you can get in during a sumo bout.
So I'm curious. I know some people have said Asanoyama kind of looks primed to be a Yokozuna candidate in the future once he has some more wins under his belt because he has a style similar to current Yokozuna. Does the stats bear that out?
A little bit. In particular, Asanoyama has a good deal more throws than an average wrestler would. He uses Yorikiri more than any other technique, not a huge surprise, but he uses it about 70% more than the Namiyama average. So he's even more Yorikiri focused than an average wrestler. His Oshidashi is his next most used technique, but that is still less than average. He only uses it about 14%. As opposed to about 25% for normal. But after that, this is probably where you're going to see those comparisons being made. Uwate Nage, Sukui Nage, and Yori Taoshi are three of his next big techniques that he uses, and he uses those all significantly more than normal. Uwate Nage, again, being the overarm throw, Sukui Nage being the gripless arm throw, and Yori Taoshi being the frontal crash out. So you're going for like a Yorikiri, you're trying to push your opponent out, but then the whole mass of man falls over. That's generally the Yori Taoshi. You're crashing out of the ring as opposed to just stepping out.
Oh, that one's awesome.
Yeah, but that Uwate Nage and Sukui Nage, he uses those significantly more. Uwate Nage is at over 200%, so over 3 times as much as a normal wrestler would. Sukui Nage about
1.5.
2.5 times as often as normal. But he's also got Uwate Dashinage in there, that the pulling overarm throw at 70% more than normal. But yeah, I could totally see how these throw stats are getting in there as, they're giving a good impression for what he can do in the future if he can stay healthy, if he can work his way up the ranks, etc.
Yeah, I'll be kind of curious if that kind of changes throughout his career too, because I feel like a lot of young guys, they seem to kind of specialize in something. We've seen this in Abi, who very much about pushing, and also in Takakeisho. I think it's probably the best example of where they specialize with one style and that gets them really far up the Bansuke. But then as their career goes on, they have to kind of get more well-rounded with different styles. And they get a little more diverse with the Kimurite.
Exactly. And I think the fact that Asanoyama is doing so well on the belt so young in his career is probably another reason he's getting a lot of big talk behind his name.
Yeah, because like you said, that's a very technical kind of. You have to have like a lot of knowledge in the practice with belt stuff.
Whereas if you're big enough, you can always just, like we said with Akebono, you can always just vaporize somebody if they're not as strong or big as you.
Pull about a rig and go,
boom. But yeah, for Asanoyama and Takakeisho, out of all the guys that I've looked at, they have by far the least amount of data. Not surprising or groundbreaking there, but that just it's still enough that I feel it's good to a good illustration of what they can do so far. But yeah, I also thought that I should bring up Takayasu since I tried to do all the top guys, all the current top guys here. Takayasu, similar to Goedo, but a couple more outliers. He's fairly meat and potatoes again. But he uses pulling techniques a good deal more than the average. He uses Yorikiri at an almost perfectly average rate, but then after that, Oshidashi he only uses about half as often as the average. Hitaki Komi and Tsuki Otoshi he uses 60% and 30% respectively more often.
You said that Oshidashi is about half as average.
About half as often as you'd expect.
As you expect, being the average.
Compared to the average.
Compared to the average rikishi that is
Namiyama.
Namiyama.
Yeah, it looks like he uses Oshidashi about 13% of the time, according to Jake's spreadsheet.
That's fascinating because...
That is a really weird way to phrase it, as if you don't believe what I have on my spreadsheet.
More making it like, oh yeah,
according to what Jake has written down.
Yeah.
Well, no, I was just making it sound like
Like these
oh yeah, no,
numbers.
I know off the top of my head that Takayasu uses Oshidashi 13% of the time.
Oh, I see. You were trying to flatter me. In that case, I accept.
Yes.
Good.
But no, I think that's fascinating because when I think of Takayasu is like he has that scary like pushing like Oshi like just gonna be a push you out of the ring kind of thing.
He has that big charge, that's for sure.
Huge charge and like he will like supari you like out of that ring. But I guess
Have you
that's
watched
probably,
Takayasu wrestle?
I have. That's what the point I'm trying to say is like that's kind of one of my big impressions with that, and it doesn't line up with the stats. So I'm going.
I see what you mean. Okay,
which is something I'm going to have to kind of keep an eye out for.
Yeah, because when I think of Takayasu, I mean, he usually goes for a grip right away. I don't think of him more as like a pusher thruster kind of guy.
I think it's probably the intimidation of which he goes about it. Like I think that's where he gets his meanest face is when he's going for his supari attack.
yeah. And to me, at least, when I think of how does Takayasu wrestle, I don't have strong opinions or strong really intense memories other than that charge. Like that charge is by far the thing I remember most about what does Takayasu actually do in the ring.
That in his back hair.
That
Yes.
yeah.
Do you have a back hair stat?
What
is he? He's obviously above average, but what is the average amount of back hair?
Takayasu and Kaisei they swing the average so much that I don't think that data point's useful.
That's a good point.
But yeah, so Takayasu, he's one of the guys along with Tamawashi that I hadn't really put a ton of thought into how their technique varies from the norm. But opening it's opened my eyes a little bit to do the stats and see that Tamawashi is massively more focused on pushing than he is on grappling, for example.
Yeah, that's fascinating.
Unless he can break your elbow, and then he is all about it.
No one wants to get in for a grappling match with him, so they always keep their distance for a pushing match.
Yes, exactly.
What's Tamawashi's like most lost by Kimurite? Do you have that configured?
I may or may not have stalling for time. I got it. He loses by Yorikiri more than anything else,
Wow.
but still just slightly below the expected rate.
Okay, so people are still getting grappling matches with him, but just coming out ahead.
Yeah, for the most part. He's very he does not have very many outliers at all as far as his losing techniques. They're all pretty similar to the average. Sometimes he'll lose by throws a little bit more than normal, but those numbers are low enough that it's not,
All right, there goes my
not
narrative.
condemning.
There goes my narrative that no one wants to get in a grappling match with him.
Yeah, there you go. It's gone. It's dead.
That's unfortunate.
But speaking of outliers for how people lose, why don't we take a look at Takakeisho, who loses by pulling all the dang time. Again,
You don't say.
Not shocking, but it is. It's fun to quantify how much that happens. So, looking at Takakeisho's losing techniques, it shouldn't be too surprising either here that Oshidashi is his number one losing technique because he gets into those pushing battles more often than anybody, pretty much.
Yeah.
So, of course, he's going to lose some of those.
You either win by the Oshidashi or lose by the Oshidashi.
Exactly. Yep. That's what Takakeisho says to himself.
Yeah, I think it was Abraham Lincoln. It's a quote.
Yes. Yep. I see you're boning up on your sumo history as well.
Oh, yeah. He was a big fan.
Adjusts glasses. But yeah, so he loses by Hataki Komi twice as often as normal. Hiki Otoshi 2.5 times as often as normal. And Tsuki Otoshi 50% more often than normal.
Oh, wow.
Like all of those are significant and by the numbers too. Like those are all more than 10% of his losses each are by each of those three pulling techniques.
Yeah, he should. That's if I was his coach, I would probably say, "Hey, don't be losing by pulling."
That's what I was
winning
thinking.
by pulling.
So I've actually made some phone calls.
Oh yeah.
Oh no, I
Oh, you want me to make a phone call?
if you have the number, please do. Yes,
That's good.
that was the only thing stopping me.
I think Takanohana still has his contact, so I would just text Takanohana.
Because
Yeah, go for
clearly we have his information.
Oh yeah, naturally.
Yeah,
Well, who'd you guys talk to in Japan?
You guys, that's who I talk to.
exactly. So some other recent wrestlers that were totally worth analyzing here. We got Haruma Fuji and friend of the show Kisuno Sato.
Oh heck yeah.
That guy who asked to take our picture while we were in Japan. It was pretty great. Friend of the show, Kisuno Sato, wins by Yorikiri 75% of the time, or 75% more often than normal. So about 42% of his wins were by Yorikiri. He is definitely a more grappling focused guy. Yori Taoshi, another big one. He uses that 50% of the more often than normal. But his losses were surprisingly the only one that stood out to me here. He lost by Yori Taoshi 8% of the time. That's like 176% more often than normal.
Yori Taoshi, what's that?
That is the frontal crash out. So like he would get into those wrestling battles on the belt, and then he would land on his butt with somebody on top of him.
I'm fairly certain that's how he sustained this injury against Harumu Fuji.
I do remember he went flying. Was it a Yori Taoshi?
Ryan's thinking something.
No, I was going to correct you on something else.
Okay.
So once again, Harumu Fuji, the great tactician Harumu Fuji was able to defeat Kiseno Sato by doing the frontal crush out Kimarite.
Yes, there you go.
His one weakness.
One weakness.
Yeah, that's what I was going to correct you, Jake. Technically, it's not a crash out; it's a crush out.
Oh, shut up.
People are sticklers for these sorts of things.
Yeah, you. Harumu Fuji, the murderer of our poor friend of the show, Kiseno Sato.
The great tactician.
The great tactician. Actually, seriously, yeah. He had 44 different winning techniques in his career.
Wow. Okay, so
that's a crap load.
Okay, so
the most of anybody I've looked at.
I was going to say compared to Hakuho, he had 40, I think you said.
Let me go back real quick. Yep.
Wow.
Even more than Hakuho and a substantially shorter career at the top.
That's impressive.
Well, I mean, he had a decent length career. He just spent less time as a Yokozuna. Whatever.
Yeah.
But Harumu Fuji, he used Yorikiri slightly more often than normal, Oshidashi slightly less often than normal, not hugely. And then his third, fourth, and fifth most commonly used techniques are all throws, and he used them way more often than normal. Uwate Nage, 140% as often as normal. Shitate Nage, 500% as often as normal, more often than normal. And Uwate Dashinage, 340% more often than normal.
Those are some high.
Those are some
numbers.
big numbers, and they're all like when I say 340% more often than normal, he used it 38 times. It's not like something where it's like an artifact of the statistics. You know, it's not like a small numbered thing.
Yeah, there's a lot of data to back it up.
There's a decent number there, a large enough sample size to say for sure he was good at sumo, and he did a lot of throws. He also lost by a shitload of different techniques.
Oh, wow.
He lost by, let's see, 83 minus 48. Ryan, quick.
I'm sorry, I was not paying attention. I got a text from my mom.
It was a lot.
Okay.
Oh, wow.
He lost by such varied techniques as Tsukihiza, Makio Toshi, Fusen.
Ooh.
Lost by that 6 times.
The mighty Fusen.
The mighty Fusen.
Gets the best of them.
Yeah.
Except Ikioi.
Except for the mighty Ikioi and Tamawashi, yeah, who have never missed a match in their entire careers. Mm-hmm. Last little bit before we wrap up, I did Akebono and Musashi Maru. I did some other greats like Taiho and Chiyono Fuji. There were a couple fun things that I came across here. Akebono, Musashi Maru, big guys, vaporized a lot of guys with that pushing technique. It's my favorite phrase that I heard today somewhere, and I'm going to keep using it.
I love it.
Yeah, Musashi Maru.
Oshidashi, vaporize.
Vaporize, yep, exactly. Musashi Maru, 7% of the time, or 140% more often than normal, would Oshi-Taoshi people. He would push them until they fell over out of the ring.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
That's great. And these are the Yokozunas from the 90s that were just big. Like
yeah,
just really big.
These guys, we go ahead, Ryan.
Oh, I was just going to say, like, Akebono, when I think of him, I kind of think of him as, like, Tsukidashi, like the pushing, thrusting out. But he's got most of his wins by Yorikiri, which kind of surprises me because every time I think of a match of his that I've seen from the past, it was, like, thrusting.
Yeah. He did use thrusting techniques about 4 times as much as normal. But his top 2 winning techniques are Yorikiri and Oshidashi at almost exactly Namiyama standard. Which that was kind of weird because I figured somebody like that, if we know him for all of his like massive powerful thrusting, you'd expect that the Oshidashi would be much higher, right? But yeah.
But I guess it's more well rounded than that.
A little bit more well rounded than we than the common idea of him, at least among the 4 of us when we're talking about him and stuff like that. So lastly, let's take a quick look at Taiho and Chiyonofuji. Taiho being the greatest wrestler of the 60s. Chiyonofuji mainly like the 80s. But these are before like Asashoryu and Hakuho came along. These were the guys that at one time or another held the Yusho record. They won a buttload of tournaments. And what I thought was really cool about these guys is back in the day, they used a lot of tsuridashi, that lift out technique. For Taiho, he used it 29 times, or 4% of all his matches. Chiyonofuji, 5.5%, or 45 times in his career.
I wonder if guys have been getting bulkier and heavier as like time has gone on, as like
just
strategy.
Just to deal with those guys.
Well, Taiho and Chiyonofuji, if guys have been getting heavier as time has gone on, they wouldn't have been facing. They've been facing lighter guys that they could more easily lift them up and place them out.
No, it's definitely an artifact of the past. You know, you can't really compare to 60 years ago. We can make our own inferences about how the numbers compare. To somebody from the 2000s or the 90s. That's a much better comparison. But when we're talking the 60s and the 70s and the 80s, it's it's
a different time.
It's a different time, so we're more looking at what is the dominant style of the time more than we're looking at what's the average style of the time. But yeah, there's a lot of inferences you can still make. For example, Taiho and Chiyonofuji, neither of them used Oshidashi more than 5% of the time, as opposed to the modern average of 25% of the time.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Whether that tells you more about Chiyonofuji or it tells you more about the era, I can't say for sure with my knowledge of it.
Sounds like you're going to have to go back and do the year-by-year analysis.
That's what you think, Ryan. No, this was a fun project, and I hope to expand it. Ideally, somehow we'll have it more than just a reference for our own show. Someday it'd be fun to get something more interactive, but not in the works as of right now.
Yeah. So it sounds like the ways you're gonna. This has pretty much been a long-winded way of us saying, if you hear us referencing this stat, this is what we're talking about.
Oh, we'll probably explain it at the time, but for the most part, it's a new tool that we're going to be using for ourselves for our own analysis, and hopefully, when we find new outliers, we'll share them and pass those along. But yeah, this was a lot of fun. I learned a lot more about the Kimurite than I expected to. Like nage is the end of every throwing technique, right?
Does that mean throw?
Yeah.
Whoa.
Uwate nage, the uwa, that means overarm throw. Yeah. And then the shita meaning under.
Yeah.
It's I think I'm actually learning Japanese. I think I'm learning Japanese. I really think so.
You really think so?
I'm so happy I made that work, and Ryan's face made that all worth it. That is about all I've got for this one. But why don't we wrap it up? But that's that. Like I said, this is something that I'm going to be using in my own analysis, and hopefully we find more of a way to get it out there for other people to use as well.
Yeah, it seems a great way to identify styles.
Yeah, and like we were saying about like Tamawashi in particular, it makes me rethink what I need to watch his technique more closely. If the stats come out in a way that's unexpected, that means that you need to, if you get new data, you need to rethink your opinions of somebody.
Yeah, no. You just keep on believing what you think even harder, and then you think the stats are a lie.
Yeah,
I think you may have ascended to a higher plane of understanding of statistics.
Especially if somebody shows you evidence contrary to what you believe in.
That's when you dig in the heels the hardest.
Yeah.
Yep.
So dig in your heels and send us a 5-star review on Apple Podcast.
Nice.
Don't let anybody tell you that this is a bad podcast.
Good segue.
And the evidence against that would be listening to our podcast. But even in the face of all of that adversity, tell them how great our podcast is with a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts or your favorite podcast listening service.
We're on social media, I believe Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
You can check out our blog, grandsumobreakdown.com.
If you have any comments, questions, or corrections, you can send us an email at grandsumobreakdown@gmail.com, or you can send us a voicemail at 805-613-7866. That is 805-613-SUMO. Thank you for listening to Grand Sumo Breakdown.
Until next time,
Throw your salt high.
And keep moving forward.